Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
What a great interview we had today with Kelly Jamieson. She's just so sweet and very talented and very humble.
Oh, absolutely. I love talking to her. She didn't come out until later in the interview. She's Canadian, which, they talk about people from Canada being so nice. And I definitely got that vibe. But she's also was smart and interesting and had some really thoughtful things to say. So after each interview, we'll go, oh, that went well. So this time definitely went well. I think our listeners are going to love it.
Yeah. So what's been going on with you? Anything interesting?
Yeah, I'm going to be the old lady with braces. I've had this not wonderful mouthful of teeth. When I was a kid, my front two were protruding. See, now I'm talking about, I can't even. And so I had kind of a retainer thing that made it not as prominent, but I've had like more drifting than the Continental Divide. My teeth are like all janky. And so I've been thinking about this for a long time. I had a relative say, at this point in your life, I wouldn't bother. Well, I'm not that old. I mean, I'm planning on being around for a while. And our new dentist said a lot of the wear on my teeth is because of my bite. So that was my justification. Like, it's not just about aesthetics, although it is actually really about aesthetics. It's also got a actual dental reason why this will be advantageous. So I went and got two different opinions and found an orthodontist I was really impressed with. And they do this thing where they take a picture, upper and lower in your profile, and then they put it on this ginormous screen. It's like a horror show in my mouth. I was like, I had no idea that it looked like that in there or that my profile looked that way. He's like, yeah, you don't have a real strong jaw, which is, a nice way of saying, what's the story with the jaw? He's a very nice man, and I'm sure that he was just being very diplomatic. But yeah, so later this month, I'm getting braces, and it's a 2 to 2.5 year commitment, and
wow,
kind of looking forward to it. So
that's great. Good for you. Yeah, I recently had Invisalign for the same reason my teeth had kind of shifted. I'd had braces when I was young. And I also experienced the horror show when they put your picture up there. I was like, oh my God, I am too old to get braces again. Like I looked so old in my picture. I was like, oh my God, this is frightening. It's like the giant mirror. Do you have one of those where the close-up mirror?
Yes. It wasn't pretty, but I'm like, okay, we have to get past this. They didn't seem horrified. Nobody, it was the orthodontist and the assistant. So I'm like, nobody ran from the room or anything. So I think it's probably not the worst they've ever seen. But it was sort of a wake-up call, because here's the thing with women of a certain age. You know how old you are, but you kind of think you look a little younger than that. But I don't. I look exactly my age. Nobody is going to say, oh, I would have never guessed. They think I look fine. But if I say I have a son who's, 31, no one goes, no way. No way.
Okay, wait a minute. I'm going to have to call BS on this, because the first time I ever met you, I had no idea how old you were or how old your kids were. And I thought you were 45. Swear to God.
This is why we are friends, Tess.
No, I actually thought you were younger than me. I told you that at the time. Greg can back me up, because I remember us talking about it.
Greg is my brain and also my husband. When we're out somewhere and they start to like explain something complicated, like, the rental car information, I'm like, tell him. He's the brain of the operations. I just make up stories.
I know, we have too many things in our head to carry around all those details.
I know. So, well, bless your heart, as Susan Boyer would say, and all our Southern guests. Yes. That's very nice to hear. But anyway, so I'm thinking that in a year or two, my mouth is going to be like better and my bite's going to be better. And
that's great. Good for you.
And I'm going to have to stock up on soft foods, is what they tell me the first couple days. So
Yeah.
you've had have you had braces before,
Yeah.
the brackets
Well,
and stuff?
yeah, I had it when I was like 12, I guess. So it's been a long time. And so I went back in just because my bottom ones had kind of shifted and stuff. And they were just bugging me for some reason. I have no idea why. Oh, and they had a sale on these Invisalign. So I went in there and I'm on my I just put my my 6th week in. And they're almost already where they should be. This Invisalign thing's crazy. But again, I didn't have that much to fix. So it wasn't a 2-year process. I don't know if I would have done it if it had taken that long. So good for you for
Well,
doing something good for yourself.
I asked about the Invisalign because that would have, of course, been my first choice, but I am not a good candidate for Invisalign. There's just too much.
Mhm.
So, it's like crowded in some areas and overlapping in other areas and deviating in other areas. So it's like, yeah, no, that's not going to be how they go about it. Did you do one of those online things where you just get the Invisalign, like it's sort of a self kind of thing, or did you go through a dentist?
I went through an orthodontist. Yeah, both my girls recently had finished their Invisalign, and so I was on their mailing list, and they're like, "It's $1,000 off for end of the year or something like that." So I
Who
was
can
like, you know what, I'm
resist a
just going to
sale?
do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I went in, the orthodontist, who I don't know what it is, every single orthodontist I've ever met has been so charming and personable. I don't know if it's just like goes if they're trained that way or if that's their personality. But anyway, he's just the sweetest guy, and the first thing he said when he came in, he's like, "Oh, so it's your turn now." It's like, yeah, I guess it is my turn. We paid for the kids, and now it's my turn.
Well, I swear I had 3 kids, all with the same orthodontist, and each of my kids is 3 years apart. I swear I made a monthly payment to this practice every month for, like, 8 years. When they were going over their finance plan, I'm like, "No, no, I'm gonna pay in full," which I guess is not that common because most people have young children, and when you're at that stage in your life, that's how you work out the finances. So, I was like, "Well, that's one advantage of being older. I've got a little
Hmm.
bit more money than I used to, so this
Yeah,
is
good
something I
point.
can do, like you said, for myself."
Hmm.
But when I call you
All right.
crying because my mouth hurts, then you'll have to remind me, Karen.
Well, it's too bad we didn't live next door because Emerson could make you a really yummy smoothie and bring it over to you.
Oh, bless her
She
heart.
she would be able to make you a nice one. Well, I think we should wrap it up and let people listen to this great interview that we had. So on with the show. We're very lucky today to have Kelly Jamieson on as our special guest. She is a USA Today best-selling author of over 50 romance novels and novellas. She writes the kind of books she loves to read, sexy romance with heat, humor, and emotion. Her writing has been described as emotionally complex, sweet and satisfying, and blisteringly sexy. Say that 3 times fast. She likes coffee, black, wine, mostly white, and shoes high. And I can attest to that because I have seen her in these high heels and she rocks them. She also loves watching hockey, and she is the author of the popular Heller Brothers hockey series, Aces hockey series, and the Rule of Three trilogy. Welcome, Kelly. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me today.
All right, so we'd love to know more about your background. And I know even though we're personal friends, I bet I'm going to learn some things today.
Mhm.
But tell us, how did you become a novelist, and which of your titles was your first published book?
Well, I was writing novels when I was about 9 years old, I think, maybe a little older than that. But I wanted to write from the time I learned to read. So I spent a lot of my childhood in my bedroom with my little typewriter, typing away and writing my novel, which I called it, which dismayed my mother and my sister who wanted me to go outside and play. But that was what I loved to do. That dream kind of fell by the wayside as you go through life and have to earn a living and you have a family and they take up time. And it wasn't until my kids were older teenagers that I actually didn't have to drive them everywhere and didn't have to help them with homework every night. And I actually had some time to myself. And I thought, I'm going to give this a shot. So I sat down and once again was accused of playing at the computer. Mom's hogging the computer again. While I was writing my novel, but it worked out and I actually did it. My first published book was a novella. It was short called Love Me, and it was published by Sam Hain Publishing back in, I think, 2009. When digital books were kind of just getting going. Samhain isn't in business anymore, but I had a long and really productive relationship with them over the years.
And if someone is
And
not familiar with your work, what novel do you suggest they start with, or what book?
That's really hard. I write a variety of heat levels. So kind of depending on what people are comfortable with and like to read, I would suggest different books maybe. So, I write some really spicy, as they say on TikTok, spicy books. And my most popular book that's super spicy is Rule of Three. That's been a really, really popular series. So I would suggest if somebody likes things really hot, that's a good one to start with. If somebody likes things that are lighter and kind of more humorous, that's kind of more what I'm writing now. So some of my newer books, maybe my Win Hockey series is a good one. It's kind of funny and more lighthearted. The first book in that series is Play to Win. So that's a good start. And if people like things a little more serious and angsty, I wrote a book a few years ago called Dancing in the Rain, which I loved writing, and I'm really proud of that book. It's not actually up for sale right now because I just got the rights back to it from my publisher. So I'm just in the process of getting a new cover and so on, and it should be back out and up for sale, I think early September.
that's exciting. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. We've heard the term hockey romance used in connection, obviously, with your books. Were you one of the first to write in that genre? And also, why is it so popular with readers?
I think I was one of the first ones to write in that genre. It wasn't called hockey romance when Rachel Gibson was writing it. I think she was probably the first one that wrote about hockey player heroes. I only read one of her books, and she wasn't the reason that I wanted to write hockey. I only wanted to write it because I love hockey. I love the sport. I was told as a newbie writer that athlete heroes, you should never do that, and I don't know why. I think
Hmm,
that the reason it's popular is because hockey players are very down to earth and very humble when it comes to professional athletes. They don't have that swagger that a lot of basketball and football players often have. I mean, there are a few hockey players that are kind of have that little cocky attitude, but for the most part, they're very humble. Like after a game, when they do interviews, you don't hear them bragging about the fantastic goal that they scored, or you will never hear that. It's always a team effort. They always give credit to the rest of their team. I like that about them. Hockey heroes are also, when you think of the qualities that you want in a hero, a romance hero, you want somebody who's really good at what they do. You want somebody who's loyal. You want somebody who's willing to make sacrifices, somebody who's determined, somebody who's courageous. I mean, hockey players are all those things, or they can be, because they're loyal to their team. They'll sacrifice their body for the team, for the game. They're determined to be successful. They're courageous to get out there in what is a really tough physical sport. And yet then they get off the ice and they're quite often mild mannered and humble. So I like that kind of contrast too. There's also the romance aspect of it. I think readers like the relationships between the guys as well as the romance in the stories. The team is like a family, and their interactions are fun and interesting as well. And the relationships between the guys can tell us a lot about the hero as well. So those are some of the reasons I think it's so popular. And not to mention, it doesn't hurt that these are heroes that are like ripped muscles and abs, of course.
I think that's so fascinating that you mentioned all their characteristics as far as who they are and their personalities and how and their affect before you mentioned,
Yeah.
the physicality and what great shape they're in, because I was thinking in the other way around, that you would start off by saying, well, they're professional athletes. They're in great shape, but I love that you were looking at the other kinds of attributes first.
Well, and I'm curious too, do you think that some of those attributes are Canadian, or do you think that's a hockey thing? Like, do you think that would be true of American hockey players?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, hockey primarily was a Canadian sport or Northern European sport, and that's probably part of why the hockey culture kids are taught from a very young age that it's a team sport. Like, this isn't about you, and there isn't one superstar. It's a team sport. If hockey had originated in the US, I don't know if things would have been different or not. But I think that carries over into, honestly, I don't know if it carries over into, there are a lot more American hockey players now than there ever used to be. And the college hockey programs in the US are growing and are really popular. And I don't actually know if those same values are emphasized there or not. Maybe they are.
Now, in getting ready for this interview, I checked you out on Goodreads, and they do a wonderful job of listing
Mhm.
all your different series and then the books lined up, which I loved. But by my count, you have 12 different series, which is just astounding to me. What did you find to be the challenges and the fun part of writing books in a series?
When I started writing, I didn't think about writing series. I just wrote a book. And the reason some of those books turned into series was only because readers wanted more. That got me into some trouble sometimes because I didn't plan those other stories. And even with my Heller Brothers hockey, that was the first hockey series that I wrote. There were four brothers who all played hockey. So, I mean, of course, that leads to a series. But I didn't plan all four stories out. So I wrote the first one, and then down the road when I was writing the second one and the third one, I kind of cornered myself a few times about where I could go because of things that I'd written into the first story, but didn't think about what would happen down the road. So I learned from that if I'm going to write a series, I at least need to have some big idea of what's going to happen in with the other characters, who they are and what their stories are, even in a very general sense, before I start writing the first book. I like writing series. And I think readers like them because they get to come back to a familiar setting. They get to revisit with characters that they've met before and see how their HEA is going. And I like that too. That's fun as a writer also.
All right, so correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm remembering correctly, during the pandemic, you had an idea for a book that's very different from all of your others. Tell us about how that came about and the premise of that story.
Yes, I did have an idea for a different story. Actually, I wanted to write a story like this for a long time, for years. I wanted to write a story about a witch, something that's light and magical, like the kinds of magic I grew up watching on TV, like the TV show Bewitched. Maybe that ages me.
No, no, I loved that show.
That was my favorite.
Maybe it ages me too. I don't know.
And then I dream of Jeannie. She's not a witch, but she has powers. And but they were, comedies, and they were light and funny. And their powers got them in trouble sometimes instead of out of trouble. I watched Sabrina the Teenage Witch with my kids, so that kind of thing, just something light magic. So I had that idea for a long time, and then during the pandemic, I struggled for quite a while with my writing, as I'm sure many of us did. The creative juices just were not flowing, and I wasn't really motivated. And so I gave myself permission to just write whatever I felt like writing, just so that I was doing something, so that I was being creative somehow. And I decided that I would write my witch story. It's about a young woman who has no family and never knew her father. So she does a DNA test, which is happening a lot these days. She goes to Who's Your Daddy DNA testing and, and finds her father. And she finds a big family that she never knew she had. So, she's belonging for family and belonging and trying to feel like she fits in somewhere. And she gets that, but turns out they're all witches. And so is she. And that kind of freaks her out, of course. In the end, of course, she has to figure out who she really wants to be. Does she want to embrace that side of herself? Is that really her? What's really holding her back from embracing that part of herself? And of course, she learns that love is the greatest magic of all.
Is Who's Your Daddy? Was that of your own invention, or is there such a thing?
There isn't such a thing, but it seemed appropriate.
I love it. That's great.
Me too. I'm going to borrow it if with your permission for one of my series because that's hilarious.
Now, were you worried that your readers would not take to this story, or how did you feel about that?
I don't
Okay.
know if I'd say worried, but I fully expect that a lot of readers are not going to follow me to this experiment. And that's okay. Like, I gave myself permission to do this, knowing that it might not be a commercial success, but it was something that I wanted to do. So we'll see how it goes. But like I said, I fully expect that it's not going to be for everybody.
This is a question we ask almost every writer. What does a writing day look like for you? And what's your process? Do you outline books ahead of time?
I do not really outline books. I'm not a plotter at all, but my stories are all very character driven. So I plot out turning points for the character arc, and I know what the lesson is that they're going to learn about themselves at the end of the story. They're going to learn about what's holding them back from being the best person that they can be. I know what they're going to learn. I just don't know how that's going to happen exactly. That's the fun of the writing process for me, is going on that journey along with the characters. They kind of lead the way for me. I know you ladies understand. My husband, my ex-husband, used to think that's kind of odd. You're creating these characters. Don't you know what they're going to do? And I said, no, I don't always know what they're going to do. My writing day is different all the time. And I'm one of those people that I need to get tasks done first before I can get creative and focus on the writing. So my first part of the day is dealing with emails and getting all the business stuff done as quickly as I can so that then I can focus for the rest of the day. I know that's not everybody's process. Some people want to write first. And I admire that, but that just doesn't work for me. So then I will write as long as the words are coming or it's time to eat, whichever.
or to walk your adorable puppy, Penny.
Oh man, we interviewed an author, Grace Green, who calls that kind of writing discovery writing because you're discovering the story as you're writing it.
Speaking of the process, which parts of writing are the easiest for you and which are the hardest?
I love writing dialogue. I think that comes fairly easy for me. I'm not quick with a witty response in real life, but when I'm typing, I can, take my time about it, but and the witty responses come. So I like writing dialogue, and I've been told that I write good natural sounding dialogue. So that's easy for me. I think what's harder for me and what I've worked on a lot over the years is just overall character development. I think early on, well, it's still a challenge actually. A challenge to write a character who has some growing to do, who has things that they need to learn about themselves, like I said, and to be the best person they can be. But yet at the beginning of the story, still make them somebody likable and relatable and not just a total jerk. You can see reviews where some characters aren't as popular at the beginning of the story. And that's a struggle for me, is to get that balance right between the growth and learning that they need to do, but still making them relatable and likable.
Yeah, that's such a people are always like, oh, romance is so easy to write until they actually sit down and try to write it, and then you have to you realize that that's such a fine line, because you have to have heroes and heroines that the reader is rooting for, but yes, give them growth opportunity. So it's not as easy as you make it look.
Well, thank you.
Kelly, we have a fair number of listeners who are aspiring writers or they envision writing a book someday. Do you have any advice that you can give them for someone just starting out?
Write a lot and read a lot. Writing, just keep writing, even if it will never be published or no one else will ever see it. Just the act of writing helps your voice develop and builds your craft, and you learn just from that process. But you also can learn a lot from reading, I think. And I think that's really important. And sometimes authors don't prioritize that, but you can learn from reading authors that you admire. And it also helps to read within the genre that you want to write, because knowing what readers' expectations are and how to meet those expectations is very important.
I find when I'm reading books now, sometimes I'll be taking almost mental notes like, oh, nice transition, or I love that sentence, the way they described, whatever. So, yeah, I do definitely feel like just reading a book, even for fun, can be a learning process for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a book, and this is a good segue into my next question, but there's a book called The Making of Story, and she talks about reading as a writer and just noting those things as you go along, and to start noticing them. And that's kind of the first way to start on building a craft. So I always love that advice. And speaking of which, do you have any writing craft books that you love that you would recommend?
Well, as a romance author, the one that I always recommend is Romancing the Beat by Gwen Hayes. I've read all those hero's journey books and they kind of made sense, but then for a romance, never quite fit. Especially, I found near the end of the story, this never quite fit what was supposed to happen in a romance. So when she wrote Romancing the Beat, it's basically the hero's journey, but for romance. And for me, it was just like an aha thing. Yes, this is it. This is this is what I need. I love that book. If I'm stuck, I will quite often pull it out and kind of reread through, where I'm at in the story and kind of what needs to happen here. And it'll sometimes give me ideas. So that's one that I always recommend.
On those days when you're not quite feeling the muse, if you want to call it that, is there something in particular that helps get over that hurdle?
I will say again, reading. Actually, that's usually what I turn to if things are not there, which is happening a lot lately, but just getting away from it, just leaving my story. I'll sometimes go have a bubble bath, take a book by one of my favorite authors and read while I'm in the tub. And quite often I find all of a sudden I'm not focusing on the book that I'm reading. It's like an idea for my own story has popped into my head. So putting that aside, reading, refilling the creative well, you have to do it. And for me, it's reading. There's probably other creative ways to refill that well, but I quite often get ideas like my hero wouldn't do that. Oh, but this is what he would do. Things like that. So for me, it's reading.
Do you ever have doubts about a book, either while you're writing it or right before it comes out or even after it's come out?
Every time, every single time, every book. There's always a point while I'm writing a book where I am sure this is the worst piece of trash I've ever written. And even when I'm done, sometimes I'm sure that this is terrible and nobody's going to like this book. I think it's just a part of it that most writers feel. It's hard to judge your own writing. I do find that some distance helps when I've set things aside for a while. And sometimes with deadlines, you don't always have the luxury of doing that. But I used to, as much as I could, try to finish a book and let it sit for a good month if I could. Because when I go back to it with fresh eyes, quite often I'll say, oh, this isn't that bad. So some distance helps, but I just have accepted that, yeah, it's going to be a part of the process. Every time I write, I'm sure I'm just writing garbage.
Now, you mentioned deadlines, and which kind of leads into the next question, which is how do you know when a book is done? Because we're all endless revisers and we go back and tweak.
That's a tough question. How do you know when it's done? I mean, I know the story's done, but then the revising, I love actually revising and editing. Maybe I'm weird that way, but I actually love that. It's way easier to fix things that are already written sometimes than coming up with the words in the first place. And I could probably edit and tweak and revise forever. So having a deadline is a good way to force yourself to make that decision. If you don't have a deadline, I don't know how you know that. I suppose I think when I think back to the days when I didn't have deadlines, there was probably a point where I was satisfied, if not totally in love with the story, but satisfied that this is good enough. That doesn't sound very like I'm very proud of what I write. But like I say, I quite often feel like I'm writing garbage, even right up until the end.
Well, and sometimes I find I'm just spinning my wheels. I change the word almost to
Right.
nearly, and then later I go back and change it
Yeah.
back to almost again. And then at some point you just go, you know what? This is as good as I
Yeah.
can make it. So
Or you're
I
just so sick of it, you're like, "I've gotta send this thing away because I really hate this book." Or maybe that's just me.
no, no, absolutely.
Alright, do you have an ideal reader in mind when you write? Like Stephen King writes for his wife.
I do not. And I find that kind of odd. Like, I'm not thinking about the readers when I write. I'm just letting the characters tell their story. I suppose, like it says in my bio, I write the kind of books I like to read. So maybe I'm actually writing just for myself.
Do you have a favorite place to write, or can you write anywhere?
No, I can't write anywhere. I'm not one of those authors that goes out to a coffee shop or something like that who writes that way. I get too distracted by things that are going on around me, which, there's a time for that as well because eavesdropping and, you can get great story ideas from the things that are happening around you. But when it comes to like focusing on writing, I like to be at my desk in my office with my stuff around me and my Wi-Fi so that I've got my thesaurus.com and whatever else I need to do my quick little research things. So I've got my ergonomic chair and that's where I like to be. That's where I'm most comfortable writing.
Thesaurus.com. That's so interesting you'd say that because I swear half of my writing is finding out if words mean what I think they mean. And
Me too.
I've made so much use of thesaurus.com now, more than I ever used to, because I swear my vocabulary has shrunk. I'm like, I have the vocabulary of a 2-year-old. I can't think of words anymore. I'm constantly, no, I can't use that word again. I have to find a different word.
that's why I think it helps to put the story first and then revise later because you can see, oh, I used the same word 3 times on one page.
Yes. And you can get yourself hung up just on trying to find the exact perfect word. Like this one's not quite what I mean, and that's not quite right. And you could spend an hour just trying to think of the perfect word. Well, I could just leave a
Mhm.
placeholder there and find that word later. And when you go back to it and you're rereading that place, the perfect word just will pop into your head. So I like finding the right word, but I don't want to get hung up on finding the right word.
Does your family read your books?
Well, obviously, my son is not interested in reading romance. Actually, and my daughter's not so much either. She likes her chick lit and more women's fiction stories. But I think they think it would just be weird to read their mom's
Mm.
sex scenes like that. They think that's gross. I don't, I don't know about the rest of my family and whether, my sister reads them. I'm not actually sure if she does or not. That's okay. If they think it's weird to read the things that I write, I'm fine with that. They're very supportive, even if they don't.
That's the important thing, I think.
Yeah.
As long as they respect what you do and how you do it and are get behind you. My husband has never read even one of my books, and that's fine, but he supports me in 100 other ways. So for you, what is the best part of being an author?
Well, it's just so obvious. The best part of being an author is getting to write stories and getting to share my stories with people. That's what I love to do. It's it's
Hmm.
pretty simple. That's why I do what I do.
So who is your biggest supporter as you've built your career as an author?
Well, this will sound odd, but it was my ex-husband who, as you said, just supported me, even though he never read my books and didn't know much about the publishing industry, but he was totally supportive, did things to help me out in so many ways, whether it was like doing the laundry so that I had time to write or all kinds of things, just very, very supportive. And, whatever the other issues in our marriage were, I can honestly say that he was the biggest supporter when I was starting out and throughout my writing career.
What is your why when it comes to your fiction? This is kind of a buzzword in author circles these days, but I love it because it really does help you define, why are you spending all these hours and hours, working on these stories. Do you know what yours is?
It's taken me many years to see it, and it's really kind of, I don't want to get all deep and philosophical, but most of my stories I now see are all about people realizing that they are worthy of love. That's really what they all come down to. People will have all kinds of different reasons for why they feel like they're not worthy, or they don't deserve to be loved, or they don't deserve to find love, whether it's childhood things or bad breakups. Or, I mean, there's a million ways that we get wounded and we have that feeling that we're not worthy. But that's why I think I write those stories, is to show that everybody is worthy of love.
I love that. We're all damaged in some way. And so I could see where readers would really connect with that and get a wonderful love story, romance to boot. So what are you working on right now? Do you mind telling us?
Right now, I'm writing this Christmas story. Tess knows about this because it's a project that we're working on together. It's a super fun project. So, Tess and me and two other authors have created this fictional town and where Christmas is happening, and we're all writing a Christmas story. And I'm really loving the story that I'm writing now. I wrote actually a good part of it last Christmas. I started it when I was feeling very in the Christmas spirit, but I'm getting back to it now because I need to finish it off, and it's super fun. My story is a snowed in the cabin with only one bed that gets enough heat, enemies to lovers, romance. I love it. So there's some fun tropes in there.
Tess, you didn't tell me about this. I thought you told me everything.
Well, I know, and I'm a little worried about it because, first of all three of the other girls are amazing writers, and
Oh, Tess, you are amazing too.
She is amazing. She always
well,
says that, but
no, but I'm worried because it has to be a little bit steamy, and so far my steamy scene says put sex scene here, and the rest of the book is written, so I'm a little worried about this.
you'll have to read a couple of Kelly's books to, get inspired.
That's what I was thinking when she said she goes in the tub and reads. I'm like, that's what I need to do with some of Kelly's books ASAP.
What is the name of the series, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, the series is called Romancing the Rink. Is that what we ended up calling it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
cool.
And they take place in Garland Grove in British Columbia. And I keep texting Kelly with all these annoying questions about Canada because I keep going. I'm like going through thinking, wait a minute, is that what they call a cop in Canada? No, it's not. I'm learning a lot.
Yesterday, our discussion was about Mounties.
And not the sexy kind of Mountie or mount.
So they don't call police officer cops?
They are definitely called cops.
Oh, okay. See, you could tell me anything. I have not been to Canada, so
But they're Mounties. In a small town, they're Mounties, which are also police. I know, it's all.
have you ever been to Canada, Tess?
Yes, and actually, British Columbia is really close to us, in Seattle, so we can pop up there. And I love British Columbia, but I have not been to any other parts of Canada. But you know what? One of my bucket lists is to take a train all the way across Canada.
I would like to do that too. Apparently, through the mountains is just amazing, amazing scenery. I've driven almost all across Canada, but the train, that's kind of a different experience.
So, Kelly, at the end of our podcast, we have 10 fun extra questions that are not writing related that we ask sort of rapid fire style. Are you up for this?
Sure.
Okay. Tess, are you asking or am I?
You are asking.
I am asking.
Yeah.
All right. Here we go. The first one is, what is one food that will never get past your lips?
Liver.
Oh, I love liver. Oh, Tess is saying me too. The Tess is making the most horrible face. Really?
Yeah, that's how I feel, Tess. I've tried it. I admit, my mom made me try it.
Yeah, mine too.
You can't say you don't like it unless you try it, right? Yeah, no,
Okay.
it's just got a horrible taste that I don't like. I got brave enough to try a chicken liver when we were at a Japanese restaurant, and it still had that. No, I can't do it.
Oh,
That's
the most disgusting thing ever. Anyway.
Too bad this is audio only. If only our listeners could see the faces you're making. It's okay. Well, we'll go to the next question. Kelly, who would you want to play you in a movie?
Oh, I don't know. I have no clue. I cannot even answer that. I can't even.
I can see like a little Nicole Kidman.
Yes.
Can't you,
That's a
Tess?
good one. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Or the other one that Julianne Moore.
Yeah. I would definitely take those two if I were you, Kelly.
Yeah.
Kelly has agreed to accept those two. Okay, well, what superpower would you pick given the opportunity?
Oh, teleporting. Is that where you can just like magically appear wherever you want to go? Yeah. Because I am so impatient. Like if I'm stuck in traffic, I am losing my mind. Like I would just like to, or and much as I love traveling, but I'll sitting those hours in an airport or an airplane, snap my fingers and be where I want to be. That's what I'd like to be able to do.
Perfect. At the end of your life, what do you hope you'll have accomplished?
Oh my goodness. Well, I think my kids are my greatest accomplishment of any, obviously, and they are good people. So I think I've done that, hopefully. And I hope that maybe I entertained some people and gave them some comfort and made them laugh a little and maybe made them think a little bit.
What is the worst job you've ever had?
Oh, that would be my first job, which was at McDonald's. Isn't that everybody's first job, just about? Yeah, I was working at the front counter there, and it's not maybe not quite as hard as being a waitress because there's no way I could have carried a tray of drinks and food. That would have been a disaster. But any customer service job is hard.
I agree. If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Maybe hockey. Like I know, I think I know a lot about hockey, but it would be nice to be like the expert, and then nobody would ever question anything when I write it in my books. And if I could be the expert, then men wouldn't question. But they've done that on Twitter too, and things that I know. So I'll be the hockey expert.
Oh man, that must be exasperating.
Yeah.
What is your favorite scent?
Oh, vanilla.
Oh, nice.
Vanilla gets a bad rap as being kind of boring, but I love vanilla. I love the taste of it, and I love the smell of it. I have vanilla candles, vanilla body lotion, vanilla spray, vanilla everything.
What is the most terrifying thing you've ever done?
Publish a book. Like that's you are really exposing yourself when you do that and opening yourself up to all kinds of attention, which I don't like, even though you want attention. The curse of the introverted writer is I need attention, but I don't like attention. So yeah, publishing a book is probably the scariest thing I've ever done.
When people mispronounce words, do you let them know?
Depends how well I know them. I would not correct somebody who I didn't really know.
And the last question, if you could live your life over again, would you want to?
No.
I answered the same way. And I'm like, I've had a good run, but I do want to go forward, not back.
That's how I feel. I've had, I think, I sound like I'm 80 years old. I've had a good life.
You've got a lot more to go, though, we'll say.
Still a lot more ahead of me, but I've done that and it's done. So yeah, no. Would you live your life over again, Tess?
No, I don't think so. No, and I think about it every time because we ask everybody this question, and we've had a lot of varying answers actually. But I think I'm with you guys. No, I'm all about going forward. Plus, my life is so great right now, and it has not always been that way. So I'm thinking, do I really want to go back there? Nah, I'm good.
And we had one guest point out that even the not great parts were essential to getting you where you are now. So even though we don't want to relive them, we're still, in retrospect, it paved the way for the happiness and the creativity and everything we're currently experiencing.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Okay, well, this has been a blast. I knew it would be. Thank you for bringing your introverted self on here, Kelly. We appreciate it so much.
You're very welcome. It was fun. Thank you for inviting me.
And I can't wait to get that witch book in my hands. I'm excited about that one.
Yeah, it's gonna be out next week.
So what's the name of it?
Big Witch Energy.
Big Witch Energy. Okay.
So it'll be out by the time this podcast airs. So everybody who's listening who loved Bewitched when they were a kid, get the book.
Yes. All right. Thanks again, Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book. Brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and post a question in the comments section. This has been Behind the Book.